I think there's a lot of fixation about use cases. Everyone, when we talk to senior folks, they say, what's the use case you're trying to solve? And we have to win that war, right? Otherwise, we can't get into the foundational building of 3 to 5 year strategy.
Welcome to another episode of Advising the Advisors, the AI and Consulting podcast brought to you by Kenley. I'm Bolu, and today I have the pleasure of being joined with Jeeva, who is an equity partner at EY and the AI risk lead for Europe. Thanks for joining me today, Jeeva.
Thank you, Bolu.
How are you doing today?
Very good. Thanks for the coffee.
Sure thing. Jeeva spent, quick on like Jeeva's background, Jeeva spent decades building AI-powered solutions across financial crime, compliance, and digital identity, helping some of the world's largest organizations balance trust, technology, and transformation. So definitely lucky to have you with us today as we dive into everything from like financial crime and compliance to AI and other topics similar. Okay, so let's dive right into it. So can you just start with like your 101 on the problem of financial crime and how you help organizations navigate that?
Financial crime is a massive global issue, and if you think about it, over $2 to $3 trillion of money flows in the illegal economy, and that could be money ending up with the wrong people, money being used for wrong purposes, be it drug trafficking, human trafficking, being used for terrorism, and so on. And financial institutions have a huge role to play in stopping these crimes from happening. And financial crime prevention and risk management is about putting the right controls, right technology, and the right operations in place with banks and institutions to make sure that money doesn't go into the wrong place. And that's the problem I have been focused on for the past 10 to 15 years, whether it was in my role at a bank or in my current role in a consulting firm.
Right. So what does a typical engagement look like if we're trying to like paint, again, a typical engagement today? Would it look like perhaps, again, a bank, let's call it, trying to like, again, start operations in a new place? Like what I'm saying is like, this seems like such a critical piece of infrastructure that I can't imagine people innovating on it very much or revisiting kind of like procurement or something else. Yeah. So what does an engagement look like today? What kind of advice or initiatives are you like advising on?
Traditionally, this has been heavily driven by regulations.
Exactly. Okay. So it's responsive almost.
Absolutely. And it has been a reaction to regulations coming from the US and, of course, from various European governments as well. But more importantly, banks also have a responsibility to be a socially responsible organization. And that means protecting customers from being defrauded, making sure that money doesn't go into the wrong hands. Let's say we are buying a property, and instead of money going to the solicitor, let's say it goes to a fraudster who intercepts our money. That's not something we wanted to happen. So this is about helping organizations put those controls in place. And when we put these controls in place, it increases the cost and it increases the burden on the organization to tackle with all the extra effort that comes in. So as consultants, we are being brought in to make sure that whether it is the processes, the technologies, the analytics, the AI, all the governance that goes in is effective, but also it's efficient, and make sure that banks and institutions are able to operate and offer these products and services in a safe manner. So typical engagements could be in selection of products and technologies. It could be making sure that these products are properly calibrated to the complexities and the context of regulations, and making sure that these are not creating additional friction to customers as well. So it's a multidimensional problem, and hence we as consultants have a role to play in this space.
Okay. Yeah. I'm kind of kind of like challenging a statement I made there when I was like setting up the question, as saying like this sounds like something that shouldn't change too much, i.e. because it's so core, it seems again supposedly not that interesting, but I imagine it's quite the contrary, right? You have to like constantly evolve with the different again, to your point, like, whether reacting to the regulatory environment and regime or to, well, just fraudsters just getting better at doing what they do. So I imagine it is quite dynamic, isn't it? It doesn't just like stay in place.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's not just the regulation that is dynamic, it's the geopolitics which is dynamic as well.
Oh, really? Okay. How so?
So like for example, sanctions regimes, right? So there could be governments which use sanctions as a policy for changing the behaviors of other governments and other organizations. And this means this changes quite frequently. And we saw that during the crisis, during the Russia-Ukraine crisis, We saw during the crisis in Middle East and various other geopolitical dynamics that is playing out. So I think that has a huge influence on how financial crime and money flows between geography. Technology plays a huge role as well. With the advent of AI, we have seen a huge spike in fake identity being used for opening bank accounts. And AI can not only be used for preventing financial crime, it can also be, in the wrong hands, can be used for perpetrating financial crime. And that has been keeping banks on their toes to make sure that their technology is up to scratch. Another case which I remember very vividly is during the COVID, we saw a huge amount of loans being given for SMEs and corporates, COVID loans, right? The bounce back loans, if you remember. And there was a lot of fraud going on in this space. And in order to prevent the fraud, banks did not have the technology or the human capacity to prevent money from being taken out as loans by the wrong people. That's another example of things that could happen in a dynamic fashion which was not predicted or foreseen. It could also mean that money doesn't go into the right people when they need it. So when people were fleeing from Ukraine, they needed money at the border. They needed money for their families. But if there was a blanket regime on not allowing money to flow into certain geographies, then the people who needed the money didn't have access. So financial institutions, payment service providers had additional obligations to make sure that the money reached the right people. So it's not just about preventing money from going to the wrong people.
Ensuring that
people who are genuine customers, people who are good people, they need to have access money at the right point in time. So hence it is extremely dynamic, and it changes, and it's been evolving. Every 6 months there are different types of typologies and scenarios evolving in this space.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. So like it's almost like I mean to the point of like making sure like again there are no false negatives or fewer false negatives. It's almost like you're in the business of like excellence, like like the entire premise of the financial institution is you should be able to facilitate transaction A to B, and like thinking of fraud prevention or just like or financial crime or just like preventing the bad stuff. But if it also means allowing the good stuff to happen, then you're just in the financial services business period, just like helping them do business as usual.
Yes, absolutely,
right.
Absolutely,
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think you use the right word, false negative, right? I mean, I meet my clients, they always say, oh, we get 99% false positives, right? And I say, that's a good thing because you are banking with good customers, but it's just that your technology is flagging the wrong people, but your customer base is good if you are certain that it is false negative, false, right? So I think making sure that good people, good money moves is important. And this is why having the right technology that doesn't create additional friction for people is important. And that's the role we as consultants and we as those involved in the prevention of financial crime play.
Exactly. Yeah. Thanks for the correction there. It's false positives that we're going for. Okay. Yeah. So to segue then, right. So again, that's like financial crime and services like 101. Then let's talk about what again how like you hinted a bit on this and how like generative AI has like changed the game or how it's going to like evolve the landscape. So I guess in addition to like again yourself being like a senior partner, you have like this role of being like, again the AI risk lead for all of Europe. Again, I imagine this is a title that didn't exist 10 years ago, so I can already see like again it evolving in how you like what you consider in your scope and your responsibilities. So can you just like speak on that briefly again, what this like how this role came to be, what it looks like, and how you see your role evolving with more generative AI being in the landscape?
Yeah, I mean, we as technologists and those involved in analytics profession have been using AI in different forms. If I remember, the first time I deployed a machine learning model was like 8 or 9 years back. And it took a lot of effort to take it through the full cycle of value chain of taking it from an ideation to regulatory approval and the full implementation and seeing the light of production. Now, I think we have moved quite a lot from there. I think there's a lot of machine learning happening. But what's different this time with the generative AI and all things we've seen since OpenAI and ChatGPT and the revolution in the last 24, 36 months is consultants are beginning to use AI in their everyday jobs, right? So we as consultants, we are using AI for various purposes, right? From summarizing emails to extracting information to creating documents which are easy for sharing with multiple audiences and so on. So we call this as everyday AI in our organization, and this is actually a widespread initiative where we are all involved in it. So AI is not a separate campaign, which it's done to us as well. So that's everyday AI across all consulting folks. But then we are also looking at changing the way we deliver our services to our clients. And that could be as simple as a risk assessment on a financial crime project. In the past, it would have taken maybe, the first 2 weeks of a project plan would look like we're going to do a document discovery exercise. That can be done now, and that is happening in days rather than weeks. Because that document set, the understanding of the document set, the extraction of useful information and insights can be done almost on an hourly basis rather than people looking through the documents. But more importantly, we are not just doing sample-based document testing. We can actually look at 100% of all the information. So the way we deliver our services is the second aspect of our AI strategy. So everyday AI, how we deliver our services is changing. But most importantly, we want to enable our clients to adopt AI. Now, what's happening is, as consultants, because we are using AI and we are using in our service delivery, we are almost the customer zero of our AI, which means that we have real world challenges. So when our customers come and say, hey, I'm trying to adopt Copilot, I'm going with my own personal experience of adopting Copilot in my day jobs. And that means that I can share war stories and real world examples and scenarios. So my job in the role as an AI lead for financial crime and for risk is to make sure that I take my customers on a journey of helping them understand the long-term commitment needed for adopting AI. And that's my role. And that involves a range of activities from education, presentations on simple things like we have to win the use case war. I think we have to go in and...
What's that? What's the use case war?
I think there's a lot of fixation about use cases, right? Everyone, when we talk to senior folks, they say, what's the use case you're trying to solve? And of course, there is a particular problem statement. There is a ROI, commitment needed before people invest money on. And we have to win that war, right? Otherwise, we can't get into the foundational building of 3 to 5 year strategy. So I always think about it as, let's get the use case up and running, but think about the foundations needed for the long-term commitment needed for the AI journey. Because it's not a 2025 race. It's a 2025 to 2030 race where we have to have consistent focus, collaboration, investment of money, and attention on this topic. Because what the models we deploy today, the processes we deploy on, will completely change in 6 to 12 months from now. And that's the guidance and focus needed from consultants to go into this space. And that's what we aspire to do as well.
Right. Okay, so in the war, it sounds like the use cases are still winning. It sounds like you almost have to still commit something, just like to build trust and get momentum almost, perhaps with the stakeholders, and then still get them to say, well, look at like the bigger picture. Is that true?
Absolutely true.
Okay. Yeah.
I think...
but if you were to have it your way, would that be the makeup? Like, is there like an ideal engagement that like, they're like, forget about like getting 1 or 2 things, or like looking for CX as like thing to boost. Let's think like big strokes. Or do you think indeed that like having this initial foothold is also like helpful for your process in like helping them like build those foundations? Or is it like some idealistic engagement that doesn't need any tangible particular use cases with like a 6-month horizon?
I think this is the balance between immediate short-term and medium-term objectives of firms. I think when we go into projects, we generally have a pretty well-defined problem statement. But when we're going into AI projects, we have to challenge the problem statement, because the problem statement might be, hey, we want to put a simple chat GPT on top of all our policies. Right? Yeah, I can do that. It's almost like a day's worth of project, but what are you going to do with it? Oh, we're going to have like 500 of our operations team to look at the policy and procedure documents and ask questions. That's great, but have you actually looked at your policy documents? What's the quality of those documents? When humans used to read those documents, they had to interpret, they had to overlay their own subtle knowledge and tacit knowledge they had built about the organization. The AI tool doesn't know about it. So we need to fix the document set before pointing a technology at it. Now, this suddenly becomes a different problem statement. It's no longer an AI problem. It's about refactoring the documents that goes into AI and is used for training those documents. So hence, this is why I keep saying that the use case board is not about just fixing the immediate thing. It's about creating those inputs, whether it is internal training documents, internal culture and foundation, and the data foundations needed for long-time sustainable adoption of AI. Sometimes we have to do it more overtly, that yes, it's use cases, but also foundations. But sometimes we have to do it in a very clever way that each use case builds some slice and aspect of the foundation that's going to outlast the use case so that the entire thing doesn't become a throwaway.
Yeah. That I appreciate the clarification. Like, so the use case war isn't like anti-use case. It's just like, again, questioning the assumptions that lead that and giving, like, taking the opportunity to, like, again, question a lot of like inputs to it more broadly. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so yeah, let's shift gears a bit. Again, back to like your consultancy, if you will, like away from the customers, from the clients. What roles do you think consultants could play and perhaps should play in helping clients like navigate the introduction of GenAI into the enterprise? Yes, just like you just riff on that. Like, what's the responsibility you think consultants have?
Yeah, the way I see it is, every day there is some breakthrough, some news about the technological advancement of generic AI models which have been released, right? I mean, a lot of it is coming from the US, but also from Europe. And the big tech players are dominating the space. And I see that as the advancement on the x-axis, where they create better models, faster models, more deeper models, models which can be more nimbly deployed on the edge, etc., etc. So I think they're taking a huge amount of leadership on the x-axis. I think where consultants and domain experts and industry experts like us, like myself and others, have a role to play is around the y-axis. And that's about what's available today. Can we remove the barriers for the adoption of the models and the technologies that are available today in fixing and making the current processes efficient? And as we progress on the y-axis, it's about, can we apply the technologies available today, the models available today on tomorrow's processes, on tomorrow's financial crime detection models, on tomorrow's operating models? But even more, the real true North Star is about how do we actually pivot away from the current operating model to cope with the new things that are coming in the AI space as well? So the way I see it is x-axis, technology players. I mean, we do have a role as consultants on the x-axis as well, where some of these models are not solving end-to-end problems, so we have to orchestrate and bring them together. But definitely on the y-axis, we have to take leadership. We have to be inside the tent and making sure that we are driving that agenda. And that leadership role has to sit with functional leaders, domain leaders, people who are on the business side.
Right. Yeah, I really like the two-dimensional layout as, like, again, technical competence, but also like advice. Next question is, what do you think is one of the biggest complexity that firms underestimate when applying AI in areas like financial crime or compliance? What is the thing you think, time and time again, people think would be less of a problem than it turns out to be?
The biggest complexity I see it is scaling up AI. Is very different from how we used to think about scaling up other technologies and systems in the past. In the past, it was more about bigger volumes of data, bigger volumes of customers. The infrastructure scaling was more important. I think that problem has been largely solved at various levels, right from infrastructure to data centers to cloud, etc., has given us a lot of options there. I think the biggest challenge, which is underestimated, is around the other vectors of scaling. And what I mean by that is those vectors could be the various dimensions of regulation, could be the various dimensions of jurisdictions and geographies, the various analytical models you need to play with. And scaling these dimensions are much more difficult and harder than the infrastructure scaling. So what I mean by that is we have big organizations, whether it is the platform players, right? I mean, you could take the big vendors like SaaS or Palantir or these kinds of bigger established organizations. Solving one use case within one industry is one level of challenge, but then doing it for 100,000 customers to 20 million to 50 million customers, that's the easier challenge. But to move from that use case, from let's say a fraud detection use case into a transaction monitoring use case, into a sanctions use case, into a trade finance use case where the type of data, the regulations involved, the jurisdictions involved, the complexities and the nuances of that domain. And then if you overlay the organizational context of going from bank to fintechs to payment service providers, that scaling up is really, really difficult. So I think the volume and the infrastructure scaling is easier. It's the other vectors which are actually bigger challenge. And these are challenges within an institutions, but also across the industry as well.
Okay, interesting. And what like prior experience do you think has informed this this like point of confusion? Like, are there some is there like a wrong analogy people are taking to some other technological era that is like, well, cool, this looks just like that, and for that one scaling was a difficult part. Why do you think like people think scaling the infrastructure would be harder than it turns out to be? That would think that would be the hardest part than and miss like the other like parts. Like, yeah, what are they analogizing to?
Yeah, I think probably if you look at banks and institutions, they always started with POCs on machine learning projects.
Okay.
And it would be most likely led by a center of excellence or a data science team or a specialist team who are very technically led. They would run a few pilots and POCs and show the success, but then it will not move away beyond the first productionization. And there are hundreds of POCs. If they are really lucky, one or two will see the light of production BAU. But scaling beyond that into other domains was almost not happening so far. So what has fundamentally changed since the machine learning failures of scaling up machine learning to GenAI? I think the things that should change are, in my view, are the collaboration model between various organizations, whether it is technology, data science, functional teams, first line, second line, third line defense organizations, the compliance, risk, business teams, the cultural context of how these organizations come together. So since that has not changed, my view is that the scale up is going to fail again.
Yeah, okay.
So the only way we can resolve this is by looking at all these other dimensions upfront and not just treat it as a technology scale up alone.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. Appreciate the clarity there. Okay. So I'm going to shift gears a bit quickly to your personal experience. So before joining EY, you were VP of technology at Barclays. How did your time in industry on the front lines, being again the person getting the advice from and to operate a business, inform your perspective today as a consultant, and how did you think about the move from industry to being the advisor, if you will?
Yeah, I think I was very fortunate in my 6 years at Barclays, where I had the opportunity to work with seasoned bankers, people who worked across multiple lines of businesses, be it retail banking, credit card, commercial banking, investment banking. And it helped me understand the value chain of all these different lines of businesses, the pressure points, the frictions, the digital deficit that had been created in these organizations across lines of businesses. And what I mean by that is I had opportunities to, for example, go and sit in contact centers and listen to some of the calls which were happening. I had opportunities to go and sit even in bereavement processing centers, in branches, in places where going with people who are loading cash in ATMs and so on. Now, this gave me first-hand experience of not just risk management and financial crime risk management, but the wider value chain of how a bank operates. So when I now look at a problem statement when it comes to me as a consultant, while there is an immediate problem to solve, there is also a wider context of how this fits into the organization. And I feel that 6 years of my time spent in a bank and the experience I gained by working with industry leaders and senior folks helps me to contextualize. Now, why is this important in the discussion of AI? Context is important. I think we are not just talking about, here's the problem statement, here is the pattern, I need to reduce false positive, let me assume machine learning. But when you put that in the context of a bank, this context becomes much more important because it could change the way a solution would fit inside a bank. And I would say that this is something which I personally value a lot of my 6 years in a bank. Doesn't mean that everyone has to take the path of working in industry and then moving into a bank. I moved into EY as a senior manager, having spent 6 years in Barclays, prior to that my MBA, and then a few years in industry. So my move was the opposite. People usually take 10 years in consulting and then they move into industry. But I wanted to do the other way, because I thought that I wanted to have the entrepreneurial sort of experience of working in an organization. I wanted to be at the sales front of selling capabilities, myself, and innovation. And that was my motivation of joining EY at that point in time.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So like you can like and how did that how did that play out? Like did you indeed like feel this like again the entrepreneurial rush that you hope to find it as a consultant? Did you like how did that play out? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So my area of specialization being technology, data analytics, AI within financial crime and risk management, what it meant is if I was working in a bank, I wouldn't have the direct front office experience of sales and commercial mindset. Whereas working in a consulting organization, as a partner, I have to think about all aspects of my business, whether it is building the capability from a people perspective, solutions, relationships, building the market, go-to-market approach, um, and selling not just myself but my team, my solution, EY, and so on. And I feel that as senior manager, director, going through the sort of growth through EY, it has given me that opportunity. And I thought I would like it, but I didn't know how much I would enjoy it. So every time there is a new sale, every time someone gets promoted in the team, every time we are able to build a new solution, the kick it gives me is actually worthwhile, and I feel like I made the right decision.
Very nice. Yeah. Okay. So again, consider that consulting is a people business. And as with all people businesses, it has an apprenticeship model at its core, right? So I'm curious if you have any advice for younger consultants, again, just getting to the industry, navigating the world that is AI first today. Yeah, any hopeful message, perhaps words of caution or advice for how they should think about their roles today and to prepare for, again, the future as well in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think my viewpoint on what consultants, what new graduates should be doing has changed quite a lot in the last 10 years. I've been at EY. I think if you had asked me, like, the year I joined EY, I would say, oh, you have to really work hard. You have to consistently deliver. You have to be predictable in everything you do and so on. So I think it has changed from in the AI context we have today, things that are systematic delivery, things that need to be executed in a procedural fashion will be automated. Now, consultants should have awareness of it, but they should be able to prepare themselves for taking leadership role on all the dynamic things that are going to hit them. So even in the early part of their career, where they are in their second, third, fourth, fifth year into a consulting job, the systematic stuff will be automated. The leadership required, for the courage required for taking decisions on things that the machines cannot automate, that will be expected from consultants. It's not just the job of a partner or a director. So what I mean by that is you need to be smarter. You need to be smarter than just writing a procedure document or doing a process map. You should be able to understand the nuances of, if I were to implement this process in an organization where humans and AI and other cultural nuances are going to interact, what would be the challenges an organization would face? That level of leadership challenge is needed in consultants at young age itself.
And I guess the point is like even earlier than before. Before you could just like get by just making the best decks, for like a couple years before. Yeah, you need that agency, but I think agency is even more important earlier as the point.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And I think it's about not just about working hard and consistently. It's about smarter and having that leadership capabilities much upfront is something I would encourage people from doing. And the other aspect of this is the way the world is operating. I mean, I always have a lot of self-doubt on everything I present, everything I say, because things are changing, right? I mean, whatever you think about as absolute certain truth today might get challenged in a few days' time. So what this means is that preparing for predictable world is not a good thing. I think consultants need to prepare for unpredictable challenges and dynamic challenges. And this mindset is something which I would encourage consultants to have. And hence my change in my mindset from 10 years ago, where I would have said consistent, predictable. I think now it is about dynamic, be courageous, show leadership in as early part of your career as possible.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, so a couple of tactical things on actually no, before I ask, I was going to ask what AI tools you use, but yes, so still again on consulting, what would you say has changed and hasn't in consulting again since the rise of AI? Again, I think you spoke with this again to your advice for like the younger professionals, but more broadly in again the practices itself, even for your job. Yeah, what do you think has changed? And what do you think hasn't and will not over time? With like more GenAI being introduced into your workflow.
I think one thing which has not changed in the last 10 years, I would say, is the fundamental aspects of relationship management, client relationship management, building trusted relationships, right? I think that has not changed. I think my first few projects I've done where we have pushed the boundaries of AI, machine learning, happened due to the trust we as an organization and personally I had with my clients and them entrusting me with money, data, and time to be able to execute those projects. And those projects could have gone either way, but that trust and client relationship was important. And that has not changed now. And when you're pushing the boundaries on some of these topics, which are dynamic, unpredictable, and risky, we still need that client relationship aspect. So I would say, as young consultants, as partners, at whatever stage of career, investing in that client relationship is all the more important.
So what has then? Yeah. So that has stayed the same.
That has stayed the same, and
Yeah.
it has not not changed. I think the other aspect of consulting, which is that got even more emphasized, is we're no longer putting up project teams of similar skilled people in large numbers. So it's not like we're going to have like 20 people who are all going to be BAs. I think every project, the construct of a project and the pyramid structure consists of people from, let's say, a digital engineering team, from the people advisory team who are working on the cultural aspects, those from the conduct and risk management team. So, and we as consultants are able to bring those kinds of multi-skilled teams from whichever part of the geography and make an impact. And this is a slight difference, but not a huge amount. In the past, we still used to bring cross competency teams, but now it is all teams are cross competency by default. I think there are very rare projects where we have similar skilled people of 2-digit, 3-digit numbers doing similar tasks and activities. So I think this is an important shift.
And why? Like, and what is not obvious to me? Like, how AI like would cause that? Like, why do you think that is?
So, I mean, when I started my technology career, we used to have like in my banking career as well, where we used to run large data programs. We would have data engineers, 40, 50 of them moving data from legacy platforms into a warehouse. Those can be done using modern technology with less than half a dozen people. We would have dozens and dozens of testers, UAT testers. We don't need that level of volume anymore. Can be automated. So the main focus now is more about adoption of these technologies, embedding in businesses rather than actually doing tasks which can be automated and done in a more agile fashion. And what it means is that the barriers of adoption could be in the culture, in the operating model, it could be in the business processes, and that's where we're bringing in other competencies and capabilities. So monotonous tasks have been automated, but in order to unblock the barriers, we need to bring in other competencies and capabilities. And this is why most of the projects we do are smaller teams, but are of multiple diverse competencies and capabilities.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yes, like the bottleneck to adoption is no longer again like how many like again engineers going through the problem, but again like just like again it could be everything from like who's thinking about design, who's thinking about like the HR like perspective here and whatnot, who's thinking about support and so forth. Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, and I guess like this whole time all those things were I guess in theory still practical, but again they were not like the true bottlenecks. So like you just thought, okay, sure, this is like and this is engineer bottleneck, right? But now it's less clear that that's the case, right? Interesting. Okay. So tactical AI tools. What are some tools or like use cases? Back to use cases again. Do you use today like in your everyday work, whether personally, like planning a vacation here or there, or actually like at the office?
I think there are a couple of simple tools which I use. I'm a dad of two girls, and I've got some DIY and hobbies and gardening and those kinds of activities over the weekend. And I remember 5 or 6 years back, I actually used to pay for an app for identifying the weeds and the plants which used to grow in my garden.
Or really like take a picture of it and
Picture of
okay.
it. And I used to pay like, £5 a month
Wow.
for the app.
Just
right?
that one use case, yeah.
That one use case, right? And just imagine in the past 5 years, that's like, everyone has it, right? It takes about 5 seconds for you to like find that. And I still keep using, various apps and, even Google search for image search for finding out, oh, what's this new fungal disease which has caught my rose plant, right?
Yeah.
So it's handy, but it gives an example of how it has been commoditized and mainstream, right?
Yeah.
So even as a gardener, you can be digital and you can be like, you can use AI apps. More on a work front, I do use most of the ChatGPT, of course, but we at work we have our own internal platform called EYQ, and this has been put with guardrails for all EY staff, 500,000 of us, to use globally, and it has been not just external data set trained, but internally it's pointed to internal data sets as well. So it gives us a safe place for finding information, curating, and using it in our day-to-day jobs. So I do use that very regularly from all things from, researching about topics, finding out existing proposals, creating new proposal versions, and so on.
Yeah. What are you growing in your garden today? Like what do you have growing? Like plants? Any like
I've
flowers?
got some flowers, but I've got some strawberries as well.
Strawberries, okay.
Strawberries and grapes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay. In this weather in London, okay, well, works out somehow. Like like how? Yeah. Like all year round? How does that work? Yeah.
Definitely not all year around. Yeah. I think if the frost and the badly timed snow doesn't kill my plants, I think they do survive during the spring and the summertime.
Okay. Yeah. They must just be coming out now in this time in April, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah, and we've been like great sun as well for the last week, so they must have be very happy with it.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that is before we close out, is there anything you think you'd like me to have asked you today that just like again an passion project or like work initiative, anything again like you just or personally like passionate about and just like to speak on briefly before we close out?
Yeah, I mean, I think Bolu, you touched a lot about financial crime, and we spoke a lot about how we as EY are using AI. So AI for our organization as employees, as consultants, as partners, and so on. We also spoke about how AI is used for the risk functions. So whether it is transforming financial crime, conduct, customer lifecycle management, onboarding, and so on. I think there's another aspect of it which we are very focused on is how do we make sure that we manage the risk AI creates, whether new threats where AI is used by criminals, or AI being implemented in the wrong way without a consideration to trust, security, data privacy, responsible AI, transparency, explainability, and so on. So the responsible AI adoption agenda is big on EY. And we are focused on it, and I think this comes back to the point around cross-functional teams as well. You wouldn't have an AI project where there are 4 or 5 data scientists and machine learning developers, churning code and implementing. You would have someone quite senior who has got war stories about responsible AI, who's involved in industry initiatives, who's involved in testing of some of these models as part of those projects. And hence the cross-functional point comes in. So responsible AI is big on our agenda. And every time we talk about whether it is AI for risk or risk for AI, I think we never miss the point around responsible AI.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that. Well, that's the agenda we have today. This has been fantastic. I appreciate you taking the time out to speak with us today.
No, thank you, Bolu. And yeah, fantastic coffee, and thanks for having me here.